Welcome back to the Crypto Intellect, everybody. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are watching from because XRP holders, we need to talk right now. Things are getting absolutely wild in the crypto market, and honestly, it feels like we are entering one of the most important moments we've seen for Ripple and XRP in a very long time. We've got massive institutional news, we've got government developments moving behind the scenes, and we've got Ripple officially plugging into infrastructure connected to trillions of dollars. Yes, trillions. And when I saw this headline, I had to double check it myself because it almost sounds too big to believe. But this is exactly why so many people have continued watching XRP through the boring periods, through the fear, through the lawsuits, through the endless delays, because underneath all the noise, Ripple has continued building. While retail investors lost interest, while the media focused on memes and hype coins, Ripple kept expanding deeper into the financial system. And now suddenly the pieces are starting to connect together in a way that honestly should have every XRP holder paying very close attention right now. At the same time, the broader market environment is becoming incredibly important for what happens next. We've been watching geopolitical tensions, government negotiations, market volatility, and all kinds of economic uncertainty move the stock market and crypto market around every single day. Yesterday alone, we saw major swings across equities, and even though the indexes themselves looked kind of flat overall, underneath the surface, there were stocks exploding 15%, 20%, even higher in some cases. That's why diversification matters so much in times like these. There is always opportunity somewhere in the market, even when things feel slow on the surface. And crypto right now feels very similar. A lot of people are bored. A lot of people are frustrated. XRP sitting around these levels has people wondering if anything is even happening anymore. But usually when the market feels the quietest, that's exactly when the smart money is positioning itself before the next major move. We've seen this movie before. Retail loses patience, interest drops, engagement falls off, and then suddenly one catalyst changes everything overnight. Now, one of the biggest developments we need to watch is the ongoing situation around crypto legislation in the United States because this matters massively for XRP going forward. Right now, there are growing concerns that competing legislation and political priorities could delay parts of the crypto framework that many investors were hoping would arrive sooner rather than later. The Senate schedule is getting crowded, lawmakers are dealing with multiple major bills at once, and suddenly the timeline people were expecting for crypto clarity is starting to look a little uncertain. I always tell you guys I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's the reality of investing. Sometimes things move quickly, sometimes they get delayed, and sometimes politics slows everything down. But even with these concerns, what's important is that crypto regulation is now a central discussion at the highest levels of government. That alone is something we didn't have years ago. XRP holders went from fighting for survival during the SEC lawsuit to now watching lawmakers actively debate how digital assets will fit into the future financial system. And while all this is happening politically, the crypto market itself has entered one of those strange emotional phases where almost nobody seems excited anymore. The fear and greed index is sitting in a neutral zone, trading volume feels sluggish, social media engagement is way down compared to peak hype periods, and honestly it reminds me a lot of previous consolidation phases before explosive moves happened. I know some people hate hearing that because everybody wants action right now. Everybody wants green candles today. Everybody wants XRP at $5 tomorrow morning. But markets do not move in straight lines, and the periods where nobody cares are often the periods where the strongest foundations are being built. Back in previous cycles, XRP would spend months doing absolutely nothing. People would complain every day, sentiment would collapse, and then out of nowhere something would trigger massive momentum. That's just how this market works. Most investors only pay attention when prices are flying. They don't care during the accumulation phases. But the accumulation phases are often where fortunes are built. And I also want to remind everybody watching this that none of this is financial advice. Seriously, always do your own research and understand your own risk tolerance because the crypto market can move violently in either direction. One headline can change everything overnight. One political statement can send the market soaring or crashing. That's the reality we're living in. But one thing that really caught my attention recently is how aggressively the United States is investing into advanced technologies like quantum computing. Billions of dollars are flowing into companies working on next-generation computing infrastructure, and this could become a massive factor for digital assets over the next decade. We've heard the fears for years that quantum computing could potentially threaten traditional cryptographic systems, including some blockchain networks. Every few months, another scary article comes out talking about how future computers might crack current encryption models. And naturally, that makes investors nervous because security is everything in crypto. But what's interesting here is that many experts believe blockchain systems will evolve alongside those technological advancements. Cryptography has always improved over time. Security standards continue getting stronger. Developers adapt. Networks upgrade. That's how technology works. And XRP supporters have argued for a long time that Ripple's infrastructure is actually positioned very well for future security upgrades and institutional integration. So while some people see quantum computing as a threat, others see it as part of the evolution of financial technology itself. Honestly, I still remember hearing about Bitcoin and cryptography discussions years ago when hardly anyone outside niche tech communities cared about any of this. Back then, most people were broke college students just trying to survive. Nobody imagined these technologies would eventually become trillion-dollar industries discussed by governments and Wall Street giants. Looking back now, it's crazy to think how far the space has come. And what's even crazier is that we may still be early compared to where this industry eventually goes over the next 10 years. Now let's get into the huge Ripple news because this is where things really start heating up. Ripple and XRP-related infrastructure have now connected into systems associated with roughly $7 trillion in assets under management through integrations tied to institutional crypto liquidity networks. Let that sink in for a second. $7 trillion. This is not small retail speculation anymore. This is Wall Street-level infrastructure. This is the type of development XRP holders have been waiting years to see happen. And the firms connected to these markets are not random startups either. We're talking about major financial institutions, giant trading firms, and some of the biggest names in traditional finance. These are the same players that control enormous portions of global capital markets. So when Ripple starts embedding itself into those systems, people should understand how significant that really is. This is exactly the kind of institutional adoption narrative that many XRP investors believed would eventually happen, despite all the negativity surrounding the project over the years. What makes this even more interesting is that XRP price action still looks relatively quiet compared to the scale of these developments. And honestly, that disconnect is fascinating to watch. Because historically, XRP has had long periods where fundamentals improved dramatically, while the market barely reacted at all. Then suddenly sentiment flipped and the price moved explosively in a short period of time. We saw similar behavior during previous cycles. People completely lost interest, engagement numbers collapsed, YouTube views dropped, social media went silent, and then one catalyst brought everybody rushing back overnight. Human psychology in markets never changes. Most people only become interested once prices are already moving aggressively higher. That's why patient investors often position themselves before the crowd returns, not after. Right now, XRP feels stuck for many holders. I get it. People are frustrated. But frustration and boredom are often common during consolidation periods before momentum shifts. And another important signal that shouldn't be ignored is the continued growth in XRP wallets and institutional trading activity. We've seen major futures volume tied to XRP products increase significantly, and new wallet creation numbers have recently shown sharp spikes that historically can indicate growing interest beneath the surface. Again, retail participation still feels weak overall, but institutions appear to be quietly increasing their involvement. That difference matters. When retail gets emotional and walks away, institutional players often step in during periods of low excitement because they are thinking long-term. They're not chasing hype candles on social media. They're positioning around infrastructure, liquidity, regulation, and future market structure. That's a completely different mindset. And whether you're bullish or bearish on XRP, it's hard to deny that Ripple continues expanding relationships and integrations at a level that many other crypto projects simply cannot match right now. One thing I always try to explain to newer investors is that markets are emotional machines. Most regular people are not thinking about crypto every day. They're not watching charts constantly. They're not studying legislation or institutional liquidity systems. They only pay attention when the media starts screaming about prices going vertical. That's just reality. But the people who continue learning during the quiet periods usually end up understanding the market much better than the average person. If you're still here watching XRP content during slow periods, you're already operating differently from most casual investors. And that matters because patience is one of the hardest skills in investing. Everybody wants instant results. Very few people are willing to sit through uncertainty while waiting for a thesis to develop over time. But historically, the biggest opportunities often came when sentiment looked dead and nobody cared anymore. At the same time, there are still risks and uncertainties everywhere. Nobody knows exactly what governments are going to do next. Nobody knows how global economic tensions will evolve. Nobody knows what headline could hit tomorrow morning and shake every market on Earth. One statement from a politician can move billions of dollars within minutes. That's why risk management is so important. Some investors like accumulating during quiet periods. Others prefer buying into momentum once trends are already confirmed. There are different strategies that work for different people. Some traders only enter assets already moving strongly upward. Others slowly build positions during fear and consolidation. There is no one perfect method that works for everybody. Every investor has a different personality, different goals, different time horizons, and different emotional tolerance for volatility. The important thing is understanding your own strategy rather than blindly following hype online. And honestly, what fascinates me most about this moment is how similar the current atmosphere feels compared to previous XRP accumulation phases. Back then, people were convinced nothing would ever happen. Sentiment was terrible. Engagement was low. The SEC lawsuit had crushed confidence. And then suddenly circumstances changed. Political developments shifted. Market momentum returned. XRP exploded higher. I'm not saying history guarantees the exact same outcome again because markets are never identical, but the emotional patterns feel very familiar. Low excitement. Low expectations. Quiet institutional developments happening in the background. Retail boredom everywhere. And meanwhile, Ripple continues plugging deeper into financial infrastructure tied to trillions of dollars. Those are the kinds of conditions that make experienced investors pay attention, even when the crowd is distracted elsewhere. Another thing worth mentioning is that institutional adoption in crypto is no longer theoretical. We are now seeing traditional finance actively building the rails needed for digital asset trading, custody, settlement, and liquidity at scale. This isn't just about speculation anymore. It's about infrastructure. The biggest financial firms in the world are preparing for a future where digital assets play a meaningful role inside the global financial system. And Ripple has consistently focused on enterprise and institutional use cases from the very beginning. While many crypto projects chased hype cycles, Ripple spent years building payment networks, partnerships, liquidity systems, and compliance relationships. That strategy was criticized heavily during bull markets when meme coins were outperforming everything. But now, as institutional finance enters the space more seriously, Ripple's positioning starts looking much more relevant. The broader macroeconomic backdrop could also become a major factor for XRP and crypto overall moving forward. Interest rates, inflation concerns, geopolitical negotiations, central bank policy shifts, and election year politics are all creating a highly unpredictable environment. In uncertain times, investors constantly search for alternative opportunities and emerging technologies that could reshape future markets. Crypto sits right in the middle of that conversation now, and unlike previous years, governments and major financial institutions are no longer pretending digital assets don't exist. They are actively building policies around them. That doesn't mean the road will be smooth. There will still be volatility, fear, delays, and political drama, but the direction of travel is becoming increasingly obvious. Digital assets are integrating deeper into mainstream finance, whether critics like it or not. And for XRP holders specifically, the biggest question now becomes timing. Not necessarily whether Ripple continues building, because clearly it is, but when the market fully recognizes the scale of what's happening behind the scenes. Timing is always the hardest part in investing. Fundamentals can improve for months before prices react. Sometimes years. That's why emotional discipline matters so much. If you only focus on short-term price candles, you'll drive yourself crazy in this market. But if you focus on adoption trends, infrastructure growth, institutional participation, and long-term positioning, you start seeing the bigger picture more clearly. Ripple connecting into networks associated with $7 trillion is not a small headline. That is the type of development that could become extremely important over time if adoption continues accelerating the way many expect. And finally, I just want to say this to everybody still watching and supporting this community during the slow periods. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Seriously. Because it's easy to show up when markets are euphoric and prices are exploding every day. It's much harder to stay engaged when sentiment is low and everybody is frustrated. But these are the moments where real investors are developed. These are the moments where conviction gets tested. Whether XRP takes off next month, next year, or later, one thing is absolutely clear right now. Ripple is not slowing down. The integrations are growing. Institutional interest is growing. The infrastructure is expanding. And the conversation around crypto regulation and adoption is bigger than ever before. So stay sharp, stay informed, keep learning, and don't let short-term noise distract you from the bigger picture unfolding right in front of us. Thank you for watching the Crypto Intellect, and like always, let's make a lot of money.